Half Wheel's coverage of the 2022 PCA Convention and Trade Show is brought to you by Drew Estate's Nica Rustica Adobe.
Hi, it's Charlie Minato from halfwheel.com. I am joined to my right by Brooks Whittington.
Hello.
That was probably excessively loud. And we are here for another one of these pre-PCA 2022 live shows. This one's going to be a lot different than, I think, any show that we've normally done. It's going to be probably a bit more podcasty because we're going to talk about what we've sort of seen over the last decade or a decade plus, I guess, at this point, of going to this trade show, which for a long time was the event in the cigar industry, and maybe still is, maybe it's not. But it's certainly, 10 years ago or 12 years ago when I first started going to the trade show, it was a very, very important event. It was sort of the singular event, the capital T event in the cigar industry. And companies spend, not all companies, but a lot of companies have spent a lot of time, money, and other resources into making the trade show special. And so we felt like it would be a good time to talk about, some of our favorite booths, some of our favorite product launches, some of the most interesting storylines that took place in sort of the trade show bubble that exists. And so we're going to do a lot of reminiscing, and then towards the end of the show, we will talk about some companies that we've not covered at the trade show before that we are looking forward to covering this year. Now, Brooks, we do have two more shows upcoming. Next Friday, same time and place, or same time of day and place, we'll be back here for a sort of If Half Wheel ran the trade show. And that will be much more about sort of the issues that are facing the trade show and how we think those issues might be addressed. And then on the Wednesday after that, so the Wednesday before July 4th weekend, we'll be back to talk about sort of the 10 products that we are looking forward to seeing debuting at the trade show. I'm sure that the Arturo Fuente Patron collaboration will just not be mentioned during that show at all. Both of those shows will be at 12 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Eastern, and you can figure out the math from there. Now, Brooks, like last week, we've got a prize or prizes to give away. Do you want to explain how that works?
Yes, indeed. So like last week, as you mentioned, the two favorite comments that I pick, or questions, rather, that I pick will get a prize pack from Drew Estate that will include a 25th anniversary humidor.
I want to be clear. It's just the humidor. I don't think there's a prize pack to go along with it.
A prize consisting of a humidor. Thank you, Drew Estate, for that. And basically, you just we would love questions, so just write questions down, and we will try to do our best to answer some of them at the end of the show. The first person who comes up with each question, for example, if one person says it or asks again, the first person to have that question will win said prize. And they'll be shipped straight from Drew Estate, correct? We don't have them here.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. So.
And the inside of the humidors look like that.
Pretty nice humidor.
All right. So those are the rules. Get your questions in, and Brooks will pick two of them before the end of today's show. So, Brooks, what cigar are you smoking?
Yes, I am smoking an Aganorsa Leaf Signature Selection. Good stick.
Yeah, they definitely made out that. I'm smoking a Rocky Patel 50th. This was out of the most recent CRA pack that just started shipping to stores. You reviewed this cigar back when it was bedazzled.
Long time ago.
No longer bedazzled.
Too bad.
But fun times. All right, so now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's do a look back. So we're going to start off with kind of like a softball question here. Brooks, the trade show has been, since you've been going, the trade show has been in Orlando, New Orleans, but primarily Las Vegas. What is your favorite city to have the trade show in?
Well, I have been to Vegas in any number of years, and I would have to say that Vegas is my favorite. There's no place like Vegas. The number of things you can do, the hotel rooms that you can stay in, the places you can eat. It's really the top place of any place that I've ever been to a convention. I've been to any number of cities and conventions wise, and two industries, in fact. So I have to say there's nothing like it. It can be not great. The heat is oppressive sometimes, not as bad as New Orleans, or the humidity there anyway. There can be some problems with actually not leaving the casino and feeling, starting to feel a little bit run down after. I give it about 3 days. 3 days is about my limit before I start feeling like I need to leave. But in terms of everything that you can do there and everything that is possible, absolutely Vegas is the way to go, as far as I'm concerned. Charlie, thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm with you on Vegas. I would say specifically the shows that are at the Venetian Palazzo Sands Expo Center, which is the world's second largest hotel, and everything's connected, so you don't actually have to leave the property if you don't want to. I recommend doing that for your own mental sanity, but it is nice to be able to, particularly if you're short on time, not have to worry about getting into a cab or having a rental car or things like that. Vegas does that very well. From what I understand, Indianapolis also does that very well with their convention center layouts, but I've never been to a convention center in Indianapolis, so would not know about that. All right, so these are not going to be our 10 favorite booths of the last shows, rather our favorite booths or most memorable booths of the last 10 shows, because we've been each of us have been to at least 10 trade shows. So and these booths, like, it should be noted here, some companies spend a lot of money in particular on these trade show booths, and so there's a bit of a debate about like whether or not that's actually a good use of money, and I certainly understand both sides of that argument. But if you're going to spend the money, you might as well get people talking. So Brooks, why don't you tell us about some of your favorite / most memorable booths of the trade shows that you've been going to?
Well, so one of the most recent ones that I loved was the J.C. Newman booth that was basically made out of cardboard. This was last year. Mm-hmm. And it was basically made out of cardboard. Huge booth. Very, very cool. And it showed the factory there in Tampa. It was a depiction of their factory, representation of their factory. And it was very, very, very cool. It was very, cool to see the entire thing. We've been to the factory, and it was just, it was a very obvious, homage to the factory that was really nice to see.
Yeah, and one interesting thing about this one is there was like inside of that factory building was a very small part of the museum that you can see at Ybor City. If you go visit the El Reloj factory in Ybor, J.C. Newman's El Reloj factory, sorry. All right, Brooks, next up.
Yeah, so next up is a similar idea, which was the Espinosa booth. I don't remember when this was. You?
2019.
2019. Now, it should be noted that Espinosa's booth was also made of cardboard. However, they were the first ones to do this kind of thing, as far as we know in the industry, and it was impressive back then too. And I hate to beat a drum, but it's very cool to see a company saying, "Listen, we can put this booth together, and we can do it quickly and cheaply, and better for the environment theoretically, and have something really cool and do it that way." I was very impressed with it, and it was a very props to him to starting out the process doing that.
Yeah, and one of the keys with these cardboard booths is because they don't weigh very much. That saves a lot of money and shipping and handling cost. All right, Brooks, next up.
And then I have the Davidoff Experience from 2019 as well, I believe. And what this was a separate piece of a separate section of the booth where you would go through and you would experience different parts of a cigar being made or how it was grown or where it was grown, that kind of thing. And they would change
cigar factories look like this.
They change the senses so that you could actually see. For example, this has very dim, obviously, and they were pumping in smells, scents, odors, and sounds, things of this nature. This is the volcano, obviously, from Ometepe. And, it was a very interesting experience and certainly something that I appreciated. I didn't get the tour, but I went through it, and it was very cool. You come into this room here, and you can smell tobacco, and you can smell the, it's very cool.
Yeah,
I was very impressed to be able to put this right into the middle of the convention,
the trade show,
and you would have no idea that you're
Yeah, no, this was excellent. Particularly this room.
Very well done.
I mean, it smelled like a tobacco barn. They brought in the red clay soil to mimic Yamasa. I don't know if the soil was from Yamasa, but that's a signature feature of their farm in Yamasa. Obviously, the Yamasa cigar. And then I guess we'll let Klaus Peter finish here. And the final part of this room was a bartender who would make you a cocktail.
Well, it's a separate room.
Or the whole maze thing. Yeah,
I didn't get a cocktail, sadly.
They were quite strong, from what I recall. But yeah, so that
Can you ask for a cocktail, or did they just make one specifically, like just one?
No, I mean, you can see he's got like drinks on there.
Well, no, I mean just one kind.
Oh no, I think they had
asked for a.
No, I think they were like, you can see they're pre-mixed.
Ah.
All right, Brooks, one last
Margarita.
one on your list.
Yeah, and every year I make it a point to go to SC Dupont. Just the artistry when it comes to actually building some of these things and creating some of these products that they have, lighters, cutters. They have never failed to impress me. It's a very, very cool way to show off what they can do. And it's typically they work. I believe one of them didn't work one year.
The water lighter.
The water one didn't work, but I'm sure that did when they shipped it. But it's very cool to see. And as an artist myself, I tend to gravitate towards things like this. And it's an amazing thing what they can do with just metal and wood and things of that nature, and a somewhat unlimited budget.
This was cool. This was a handful of years ago where they were bringing in engravers to actually engrave those pieces live in the booth. One thing I was talking with Brooks about earlier this week, it's interesting to me, there are very few times when I've seen someone trying to roll cigars at a trade show, which seems like something that they would do because it seems like something that would have been done. I know it had been done back in the RTDA days, so more than 15 years ago. Toscano has done it where they have somebody in there, but their cigars are very different. I wonder if the humidity or lack thereof plays a big role into why it is, but it's always nice to see like the artisan process that this industry likes to talk about happening in person, even if it's maybe not the most excited audience to see that. All right, so on my list, I mean, the booths that stand out are tend to be larger ones, but if you're going to do it, you're going to do it big. Youre State sort of showed you how to do it. This was a booth that was there for, I think, only 2 or 3 years. And they took the Youre State booth and they added this upper level, which was decorated to look like the Brooklyn Bridge, which is a part of their logo or logos over the years. And they used that as meeting space. And then underneath it, they had some of their other support staff areas. But this was extremely expensive from what I understand because it was made out of steel, which meant that it weighed a ton or multiple tons or many tons. The beauty though was that you would just kind of see it from everywhere, and it was something that people talked about. People wanted to go up there to you got up there and you were like, oh, cool. It's just like an elevated patio. I can see everything else that I previously saw.
Only down. Looking down.
The Youre State booth from that era gets some credit. They redid the bridge concept at TPE this year, but a completely different booth. And it was not a 2-story booth. It was they put a humidor underneath it, but kept the similar theme.
As I recall, they were the first one when you walked in the door. At least 1 year.
1 year, but 1 year they definitely were not.
And you walk in the door and you're just wow. That thing is it's impressive and massive in scope and size.
On a completely different note, this booth is one of my favorites. This was a 1 year booth from what I recall. Maybe I think IPCPR 2013. And this booth always stands out to me because this is Dion Giolito of Illusione's personality just exemplified in a trade show booth. So this was a super wide booth, maybe like 50 by 10. And most booths are not that wide. They tend to try to be more squarish because it's a better use of space. But Dion took this booth, and what's notable here is there was no product on display. And there were just these couches. I think they're like off to the side, the right side of the screen. There was like a meeting area, but there was no product. And people would walk by and they would see Illusione, and you may see Dion or you may not, because Dion also owns a retail store called Fumari in Reno, Nevada. And Dion, I think he's sort of stopped doing this, or maybe they come to him now to do it. but he used to go out like in the middle of the show and just place orders like any other retailer at the trade show, which meant that trying to get him in the Illusione booth was a bit more of a struggle than it is for, a lot of other people. But people would just walk by. They didn't know what to think because here's just a whole bunch of couches, no product on display. And Dion was just like, yeah, like, it is what it is. You want to buy cigars, you don't want to buy cigars. Like, you already know what they look like. And the couches were pretty comfortable. I mean, they were probably quite gross, but it was fun to just sit by and just kind of watch people's reactions. It also sort of ushered in a new era of Illusione branding to some degree. Yeah. And this is a booth that I should point out here. Like, this is a rented booth. Somebody owned the structure. Dion just provided some artwork. They printed it out, put the graphics up, and that was the extent of it. Or it looks very much like a rented booth. I guess there's a scenario where Dion actually bought this, but I doubt it. So that was a booth that stands out to me. I think the booths that are largely have made this list that come to mind aren't necessarily the best booths. I would say that the Illusione booth, for example, is not the best business case for a trade show booth. The Rocky Patel booth, though, is the best case for a large-scale trade show booth. I've mentioned it a couple times already, but weight is a huge deal. The Rocky booth is just a series of these cases and then all sorts of furniture for people to sit down. On one side of the booth, they'll typically have like a small stage area because he hires, usually I think, the same 2 singers to come in and perform music throughout the week. Anywhere from sort of like Frank Sinatra to Coldplay and kind of anything in between. And then you'll see there's like a bar area where they have craft beer on tap. And then they've got like a work area as well where they can take sales orders and things like that, specifically with some of the in-house sales team. And then the rest of the booth is just these display cases and seating. And it is a much more efficient use, in my opinion, of space. And the other thing with Rocky's booth that's a lot different, because we were talking about this earlier, like the Drew Estate booth has lots of seating. There's no open seating in the Drew Estate booth, or at least back when there was a Drew Estate booth at this trade show. Rocky, on the other hand, tends to bring way more seating than he needs, and he wants you to just come hang out in the booth and maybe accidentally place an order for some Java or Edges or whatever. And there's different types of seating. You can see in this area there's some like lower, bigger furniture, and then in the background you can see some of those high top tables. And the other thing with the Rocky booth is it's always super, super busy. There's people walking through it, there's people walking into it, people walking out of it, etc. I think it's an excellent booth. And setup time and cleanup time for this booth compared to the other large booths at the trade show, it's really not comparable. They will unload and unpack this thing and then pack it up way quicker. Basically, they'll be done before people are 20% of their way through their cleanup process. And there's a reason why they haven't replaced it.
Yeah, and one of the things you mentioned that I guess I wanted to highlight was the fact that this is very scalable as well, where you can knock down the size pretty easily and not have any issues with that. So if they wanted to knock it down by half or a third, it's pretty easy to just do that.
They could do it every day if they wanted to. I don't know why, but like if you were like, oh, every day we're just gonna remove 25% of the booth, you could do it because it's just pack up some display cases.
If anybody noticed.
Tell some people to get some furniture. All right, on the complete opposite end of that spectrum, and this is a booth that was, when it debuted at the trade show, was really, really talked about. Perdomo is a bit different than a lot of these other large-scale booth companies in the sense that they take pride in having their staff set the booth up instead of bringing in contractors to do so. That said, I think a couple of these elements I'm not sure that Perdomo set up. If you see on the front there, up top where you would enter the booth, that is a video screen or video screens, and they were playing a movie throughout it. And then the other thing is that aerial feature, that circle, that's also a curved video screen. The Perdomo logo at the bottom is not. And they were displaying imagery throughout it. And, similar to that Drew Estate booth, if you're going to spend serious money, and some of these companies are spending, $1 million on a trade show booth, if not more, then you should make sure that people are going to talk about it. And the Perdomo booth was, when it debuted with these video screens, people were like, oh, have you seen Nick Perdomo's video screens? And it was like, yes. How could we not see them? They're curved. You can see them from all different angles. And so this was a great booth as far as I was concerned. Sorry, I'm trying to see. Patrick Legreed mainly had some similar answers. He nominated Placencia, had some very realistic-looking fire. Davidoff also did it, I believe, before Placencia had, and I'm sure somebody else has as well. And also La Gloria Cubana's booth within a booth. I don't really know what he's talking about.
In fact, no idea. But in fact, the fire from Placencia, that fire, they had to call the fire people to come
the
and
fire
make
marshal
sure,
came and just
and make sure it wasn't actual real fire.
And honorable mention for the House of Emilio RV in the Orlando parking lot. All right, Brooks. So the trade show is a place where a lot of new products are introduced. As in case anyone hasn't been reading Half Wheel, or if you have been reading Half Wheel, you probably noticed it that there's a lot of products that are going to debut, quote unquote, at the trade show. This is not new. This has been taking place for years, and if anything, it's probably slowed down. These are not going to be our favorite cigars, right? Like that have ever came out at the trade show. Rather, it's interesting because every once in a while, it doesn't happen every year at the show, but you'll hear people talk to us in particular because a lot of these manufacturers, they're in their booths, particularly for the first 3 days, all day long. So they don't really walk around and they don't taste other people's cigars and they don't look at the packaging, etc. They just hear from the other people, whether it be retailers or media, that are walking around, and they'll, you'll go into the Oliva booth and they'll be like, "Hey, have you seen anything interesting?" I mean, it happens every booth, right, Brooks?
Every booth.
It's like, "Hey, you smoke anything good?" And it's like, "I have not smoked a cigar all day because I have this camera and this microphone and this pen." And
you'd be shocked at how few cigars we smoked during the
you
show.
were shocked when I was like, "Yeah, I'm not smoking cigars during the trade show," and you're
At
like,
all.
"Come on,
Yeah, you got to smoke one.
Like I eventually, I'll light up one at the end of the day, but like it's just a huge.
But even the ones we smoke, you don't finish. It's just
Yeah, so it's like I'd rather not do it until the end of the day when I actually might be able to smoke half a cigar, and by cigar I mean like Petit Corona. There are times though when like everybody is talking about the same cigar, not usually because of how it tasted, although sometimes it is. And we really wanted to highlight a couple instances in which like that trade show was dominated by discussion about blank. And so the first one was, I distinctly remember this launch. I think this was in New Orleans, if I'm not mistaken.
2015.
Yeah, so that would have been New Orleans.
Yeah, so the one came to mind, is my mind as well, was the Padron Damaso. And this was a cigar that was named after, according to my review, was named after...
Probably after Damaso.
What? Damaso Padron, who is the grandfather of Jose Padron. And basically, this is a Connecticut wrap blend that came out, and it was a pretty big deal when it came out. People, I mean, all over everywhere you go, have you tried the Padron? Have you tried the Padron, the new Padron? And it was a pretty big deal when it was released and announced as well. And they gave out samples, which is not something they typically do, which was also a pretty big shock. So just shocking all around.
Yeah, I mean, like for example, last year they had the Family Reserve number 95s on display at the trade show. Those are those short, thick Family Reserves. I don't think anyone outside of the Padron family, maybe not even them, smoked that cigar. I mean, they were not giving them out to retailers to smoke, which is what most companies do. Padron did a different approach with Damaso, and it was sort of interesting because like you would just hear people like within like 3 hours of the show opening, the industry had sort of already decided what the narrative was on Damaso, which was that it was good, but not really Padron and probably overpriced. To that I say, like, I don't know what you were necessarily expecting. Like, Padron's probably not going to make a bad cigar, given the price points. Like, we knew what the price points were, and it was a Connecticut wrap cigar, which they don't really do. The cigar, though, I would say that really takes the crown from, like, the talked about cigar or cigars during the trade show was Foundry. So this was from General Cigar Company, I believe in 2012 is when Foundry debuted, but I might be wrong about that. I'm a little concerned.
Sounds right.
These pictures are terrible, so I don't really...
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, but I think 2012. So the first generation of Foundry was like a steampunk theme, and that's what you can see on the screen. There was another trade show where they came back with like, what were to happen if there was tobacco on Mars, and we blended a cigar to taste like that. Now, I will say, like, looking back on this booth, if this had just been a standalone company, I don't think it would have gotten the same response. The reason why it got so much response, though, was because this was from General Cigar Company, whose booth is very cookie cutter, very corporate, and this was just like, they've let someone do whatever they want off in the corner there. And it was shocking. the cigars were what the cigars were. I don't think they were bad. I don't think they were excellent. I think they were kind of average or right in the middle. Some of them were very good. One of them scored very well on Half Wheel, and some of them weren't as good over the course of. I don't know. There had to have been like 50 or 60 foundry releases when all was said and done.
Yeah, some of them only had like 6 boxes. Or
that
something
came much
like
later.
That.
These were the ones with the gears. But what I was getting to is the whole theme. The theme was very well thought out. It may not be my favorite or your favorite, but it was like a very dense story that had been created to explain the various parts of Foundry. We didn't ultimately get to see it all sort of come together as Michael Giannini intended because it didn't sell well enough to keep justifying its marketing budget inevitably because General phased it out eventually. But it was something, and
it was very, very well done. And like you said, when you come into the General booth and you see the normal stuff and and then you see this, and it was overwhelming almost. You're like, what the heck is that? It was very well put together, very well realized. The way that he wanted it to be done, and yeah, it was impressive. It was an impressive show for them in terms of Foundry.
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna kind of keep with this theme here, and sometimes there are trade show headlines or themes of a trade show talked about things, or you just kind of inescapable, similar to the Padron Damaso and the Foundry, but they're not necessarily related to products themselves. And it's interesting to me because so many of these things, and Brooks and I, we were planning out what to talk about during the show, we just kept coming up with like answers to this question, and almost none of them end up being consequential later on. And so the way that I like to think about this is, and I mentioned this on the consensus, I call it the first take problem, because we sort of do this with our editors. We've had a variety of editors that we bring in, and they edit all the stories, and they help us out in the back end of putting together the content that you see during the trade show. And for the last 4 or 5 years, they've actually been in Las Vegas with us. And so they get to hear a lot of this stuff, and they get to read things, but typically these editors really don't know anything about the cigar business, and certainly not to the level of nuance that these stories require. And yet, in some of these instances, you'd be like, so they interact with the cigar business for a week, and then 51 weeks go by, and then they're back again a week later, or a year later for another week. And most of the time, the stories that dominated the trade shows that took place the previous year have completely fizzled out by the time the next one takes place. That said, there are times in which, like, you would think this is the biggest deal facing the cigar industry just based off of what happens in the echo chamber that is the trade show. So, Brooks, do you want to get us started off with the first thing that comes to mind?
Right. So, first thing that came to mind was something fairly recent from last show, in fact. And this was on the last day of the show, a bunch of the manufacturers who were at the show decided to get together and take a photograph and post it on social media. And basically, the tagline that they chose to accompany this photograph was, "If you're not here."
No, Brooks. Together, one family, or one family.
Yeah.
And then
I'm not gonna
no, that part gets left out a lot of times.
It did for a reason. Yeah.
Well,
If you're not here, you're not relevant, is essentially what they said, and
that's
exactly what they said. But that was what they meant as well, and it caused a fairly big stir.
But Brooks, why did they say that
in the industry? What's that?
Why did they say that? Why did they write that?
Do you want to know?
Well, no. I'm saying, like, we haven't just explained why they might have decided to write that.
They're really, really.
No, in like basic terms. I'm not trying to make you say things you don't want to say. Like,
right?
Who were they talking about?
They were talking about the people who hadn't come, who hadn't attended the show
specifically,
and the four bigger companies that had decided to drop out,
which are
Drew Estate, Davidoff,
Altadas, General.
Right. So they decided that they were going to post this, and it just blew up. And some people were happy with the results, I guess, and some people were not. And
who was happy with the results?
Both sides. The general consensus was that it wasn't the best idea, and caused a lot of controversy. And at the end of the day, it didn't really move the needle that much, right?
Before posting it. No, I mean, that's the thing. Like, so
you would think that it was just.
What I was trying to get you to say, Brooks, is before the impacts of COVID really started taking place
down.
in the U.S., 4 of the 5 largest companies in the cigar business, Altadis, Davidoff, Drew Estate in general, announced that they were not going to attend the then planned 2020 trade show. Due to COVID, the 2020 show did not happen. The 2021 show did happen, and those 4 companies were not there. They will not be there in 2022 either. Although I guess Room 101 is still going to be there. So new STG employee Matt Booth will be there, but General Cigar Company in its entirety will not. I don't exactly understand what. Like, I understand why they felt like this might have been a good idea. I just don't understand the process as how this was going to result in these people coming back to the show, because these companies haven't. And it's not just those 4. There are other companies like Romacraft, Daniel Marshall, Prometheus, AJ, Viaje, that all don't appear to be coming back to the trade show, that also weren't there in 2021. And I think it's also important, and one of the things that got really screwed up here is that, like, La Flor Dominicana wasn't at this trade show last year. La Flor will be here this year. I don't think they were talking about La Flor. I mean, maybe they were, maybe some of them were, but, like, there was a bit of a misunderstanding or a lack of understanding of, like, it's not just these 4 people who might take slight at it, even if that's who it was directed at. Yeah, not a great look.
In fact, there were a number of companies who decided not to come because of COVID or because they didn't want to deal with the, all of the stuff going on. And
yeah, or because guess what? They didn't need to go to the trade show because they were back ordered.
And that certainly didn't sit well with quite a few people. But now, who knows if anybody.
Well, some of those companies are back.
Remembers.
Like, the floor is going to be back, but it didn't. Whatever they. I mean, I have to imagine the aim was to get those 4 companies to come back. Hopefully it was, because the trade show needs those 4 companies. Maybe it was to, like, try to put down those 4 companies and insult them. I mean, this just wasn't.
That can't be. I mean,
it definitely could be.
Do you really think that's going to do any good? I mean, what's the point of that?
I that's why I said, like, I think if you had game planned this out and been, I mean, I mentioned it in the editorial after the show. It's like, if Dylan Austin of Davidoff sees this post, Dylan's going to do what? If
immediately sign up again.
If Javier Sadas of Altadis or Tabacalera sees this post, what is he going to do? If Regis Brosma of SCG General is going to see it, like, and Glenn at Drew Estate, same story. Like, they weren't going to look at this and be like, "Oh shit, we screwed up. Time to come back." All right. The question, or the answer to this question that really I think stands out more than anything else, is Syndicato. So in 2013, a group 13 or 14. Let's go with 13. 2013, a group of retailers got together and like 50 plus retailers got together and decided, this had been brewing for a while, I should clarify, but finally launched a company where they said, you know what, we're going to get together and we're going to pool our resources and pool our buying power, and we're going to have our own cigar brand that we're all going to sell, and we're going to sell to other stores, and we're going to try to take some of that margin that the manufacturers get and keep it for ourselves. And because of our collective buying power and the number of storefronts that these retailers had, they felt like this brand would have a massive leg up in terms of succeeding. The manufacturers saw this and went, this makes us uncomfortable because now our customers are competing, retail customers who buy cigars from us are competing with their own brand against us, to which the retailer said, yeah, well, since most of you already have your own retail operations, whether that's General Cigar Company with Cigars International or Altadis with JR Cigar, or even people smaller like Giangiolito of Illusione and Fumare, the retailer said, you know what, like, all's fair in love and war. I guess this wasn't war, but they said, if you can do it, so can we. And it's
a war they lost.
The war did not go very well. If in fact was supposed to be a war. But for 4 days at this trade show, Syndicato was the number one topic of conversation. And I don't know what number 2 was, but it was probably something else related to Syndicato. It was the trade show where all that was talked about was Syndicato. And it took about 90 days after the trade show, and it became very evident that Syndicato was probably not going to succeed as a cigar company, and certainly not to the grandiose ideas that were proposed. As it turned out, the manufacturers cared a lot about Syndicato and wanted to talk a lot about Syndicato, and the retailers who were part of Syndicato wanted to talk a lot about Syndicato.
They want to talk about it a lot.
The retailers who weren't part of Sindicato had no interest in carrying these products, and consumers had no idea what they were. And Sindicato is still around. It's now distributed by Gurkha, and my upcoming review, I think tomorrow's review actually is a Sindicato product. It's still around. It's still going, but it never reached anywhere close to the potential that was once discussed about what Sindicato was going to be. And there were some other aspects to it. They said they weren't going to sell their cigars online. They weren't going to discount their cigars beyond a specific amount, et cetera, et cetera. The one thing I'd be curious to know about Sindicato, and I'm not sure, that you or I are qualified to really make this assessment, is whether or not any of the complaints that retailers had that led to Sindicato and the things they complained to the manufacturers about as part of the justification for doing this resulted in any change. I don't think so, but perhaps there was some other benefit to Sindicato that we just didn't realize. But I mean,
yeah. So if you do know, let us know.
Yeah, but
in the comments.
That trade show was something else. On a lesser degree, but an interesting one, and one that I felt like was worth mentioning. And interestingly, Patrick mentioned it under his sort of submissions to these ideas as well. In 2010, Sam Lucia, who was the front man for Nub and Cane, I should point out, Oliva has one version of events about how Nub and Cane were developed. Sam Lucia has another version of events. This is not the time or the place to litigate that out. But
so to speak.
They did litigate out something else. So Oliva had claimed that Sam Lucia had a non-compete as part of his agreement, and Sam tried to come back to the cigar industry less than a year later at the trade show through a partnership with Tarano. And he announced the cigar. You can see the press release on your screen called the Sam Lucia, the debut. And it made it all the way to the trade show floor. But by the time the trade show opened, it was nowhere to be found. And that is because Oliva actually did what so many companies talk about doing but don't do. They went to court. They filed a cease and desist. There was a lawsuit that came about of this. And eventually, Oliva won that lawsuit, or I don't know if there was a conclusion to it, but the debut cigar did not happen. Sam Lucia did come back eventually with Lucia Tobacco Company and now runs Stogie Bird. But this was an interesting one, and certainly in the first couple days before the trade show, or those 2 immediate days before the trade show, this was a big deal because, there was a lot of gossip and those sorts of things. And you rarely see companies get to this sort of level where they're, willing to hire lawyers and go to cease and desist and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and we actually reviewed this cigar, as I recall.
It's part of Holy Grail Week.
That's right. I think we've got another one down there. So I believe they couldn't have given out very many of them, but it was a big one. It's like a 6x70.
Yeah, it was a very large cigar.
Yeah, cool band. Love the band.
Yeah, I think 7x60. I think, according to the press release, 5x60, 7x60, 6x52.
Who smoked it? Was that you or Patrick?
I believe that I did it.
Ugh.
All right,
Big
one
cigar.
last one. Brooks, you weren't at this trade show. This was the one show I went to that you did not go to. In 2010, CAO had its last trade show before the brands got moved over to General Cigar Company. You can go back and read the whole story. It's not true to say that General bought CAO. That's not what happened. The parent companies of both General and of CAO decided to merge, and because General was a much larger operation than CAO got merged into General's portfolio rather than the opposite of that. What was interesting about this, though, was that this was very much like the CAO. I mean, CAO had already had a going-away party in Nashville earlier that summer, but this was very much like the final goodbye of CAO. It was a bit of a funeral vibe. And I'd like to point out that, like, everyone, and I was just getting into cigar media at this point, but everyone kept talking about how General was going to destroy CAO, and this was the end of CAO. And I will readily admit and agree with the people to say that CAO is not what it was, because it's not. It's changed. That said, it's also in a better place, I think, financially than it may have ever been. And even if it's not the absolute best place financially of CAO in its history, this is one of the rare instances where I think an acquisition actually really worked out. CAO has had some bona fide hits. Amazon Basin in particular stands out. That might be the most successful cigar that General's launched in the last 8 years.
And for good reason. It's a very good cigar.
Maybe not in terms of like complete sales numbers because it's a limited production item. But General, I mean, like if you just think about this, and I mentioned this to Brooks the other day, General has a cigar that it releases, and people like call up stores and seek out when it gets released. And then when it's not on sale, people ask about that cigar. And I don't think they have a ton of those in their portfolio. And I don't think a lot of companies have that in their portfolio, and particularly the scale that we're talking about with what Amazon Basin has become. And, they've had some other successes with CAO, but it certainly is not the same CAO that it once was. But it's been a lot more successful than I think a lot of other acquisitions have been. And if you were at the 2010 trade show, you would have thought that CAO was going to be gone within 3 years, and that it would be a complete failure. And I don't think that that's a fair assessment of what's taken place. All right, Brooks, I've spoken for long enough. Let's get...
Are you sure?
Probably. So why don't you talk for a little while about some of your favorite
Yes.
giveaway items?
So, you go to the show, and a lot of the manufacturers are giving away certain things, or they decide that they're going to do something a little different. First one that comes to mind instantly, honestly, was Youre Estate. For the longest time that I can remember, Youre Estate has been producing and giving away certain products on a yearly basis. So every year they have something a little different, or had something a little different, where they would have Subculture Studios, which is their in-house artistic studio, and they would draw or paint or whatever art on certain products and then give them away to retailers or whoever came by, basically. And 1 year it was shoes, and 1 year it was hard hats. They've got spray can bottles here. They did skateboards, right?
Chevettas, cigar molds.
Yeah.
Visors, maybe 1 year. Visors and hats.
Just a lot of different things, and they are very well done, and they look really, really great. And I've got a few of them in my office, and they're pretty awesome. And as a giveaway, it's an item, they would have them all over their booth, and they would, I've seen retailers just automatically go over there and go, okay, I made an order, I want that one right there, and they'd pull it down and give it to them.
Yeah, because we should point out that they're they tend to all be painted differently. Sometimes they're duplicates, but
and the Liga goes first, and they obviously. But regardless of that, they also Youre Estate's also given out numerous samplers. They had a Year of the Pig sampler that was pretty awesome.
Some of those were,
but some of them were only for media, I believe.
No, some of them were definitely only for media. I don't know if the rest of them, if any of them, actually went out to retailers.
Don't know, but they were pretty awesome. Got to tell you.
All right, next up, Brooks.
Yeah. Also, was something I saw. It was 2019. 2018. I was wandering around, and I go and see Terrence at Aganorsa Leaf, and they were giving away puritos of some of their tobacco. The Aganorsa tobacco that they make their cigars with, they blend the cigars with. And Puritos is basically a very small cigar, a very small, I guess not cigar. It's basically a leaf of tobacco. And what you do is you smoke this, and you are able to taste specifically what that one tobacco tastes like instead of in a blend with a larger cigar. And so they were giving out these puritos and saying, here, this is one of our tobaccos. Taste this, and you'll taste this specific tobacco. And it was a really great idea that I don't know that many other companies have done. They should, but I don't know that they have done that. It was really awesome to be able to taste that one tobacco and that one, in the blends that we smoke fairly often here for reviews. And it was a pretty cool thing that I thought was cool.
A lot of companies have given out cars or car leases. That's an Alfa Romeo that was at the Altadas booth in 2019. Phillips & King used to give out Rolexes, I think every day at one point of the show. If you placed an order, you get put into a raffle. And then they switched to bicycles and motorcycles more recently. I'm trying to see if Patrick has anything that he mentioned here as a favorite giveaway item, but I don't see one. All right. So we'll move on to a different conversation. There used to be, there was like Leonard Skinner 2.0 to CAO party back in the day. But a lot of companies have hosted parties over the years, and we've been fortunate to attend some of them. And Brooks, any ones that stand out to you in particular?
Well, I tend to be less formal in terms of what I'm, doing and enjoying. And so the thing that pops out to me that I enjoyed quite a bit was the Romacraft parties back when they had
If you
those.
had Spence Drake appears on this show on your bingo card. Congratulations.
They were well done. They were they were just a whole bunch of people that basically got together and started drinking and smoking. And, there was always plenty of people there that you enjoy seeing that you just talked to, 2 hours before. But it was very relaxed, very, very nice. And I just enjoyed hanging out and smoking with these people in a different venue, completely different than your choice, Charlie.
Yeah, I think it would be remiss to say, because Skip would get honest about this, and I think he's got a point. The Rumacraft Party had much better alcohol selections than most part. Like they went for the premium selection of your open bar or your bar tickets. They also would like bring in craft beer.
They're very well done.
And then they would hire like very good DJs, particularly if you're into like 90s hip hop. And
who isn't?
There's an annual tradition or a tradition that seems like at every Rumacraft Party, whether it's in Vegas or whether it was their what I like to refer to as Skip and Mike's Block Party last year in Austin, also known as Weasel Fest, where at some point Skip will just get on the microphone, or the bartender usually, or the DJ will get up and just be like, hey, Skip and Mike have decided where it's just open bar now. So those bar tickets, you don't need the bar tickets. Also, the coolest invites to any party with those metal tickets or business card like things. But yeah, the Davidoff Party, the Davidoff parties really stand out. Patrick and I both mentioned specifically the one in New Orleans. That one's a little bit interesting. You and I went to the launch party that took place for Escurio, which was right before that.
Correct.
And that, I think, was probably a cooler party, the one in Miami in a parking garage. But the one, the Davidoff dinner, which was a black tie affair for many years, also got called Golden Band Awards. Very, very well done. Patrick specifically mentioned the Bumbies, which were this performance group who would sit there with typewriters. They would look at you, and then they would write or type a poem for you on their typewriter. And it was incredible, like how well they were able to capture some people in the poetry. And they also just like wouldn't acknowledge your existence. They wouldn't talk to you. They wouldn't look at you. They would just sit there and type away. And so that was always interesting to see kind of what.
I tried to start a conversation, and they were not impressed with my attempt to start a conversation.
And then one more that really stood out, also from New Orleans, Mombacho Cigars Aseada, the company out of Granada, they, which is also known as Favelis Cigars in the U.S. now, they would host media parties, and a lot of times it would be like Airbnb to house or whatever. In New Orleans, though, the party was excellent. They partnered with, who was it? It was a cognac brand, Hennessy, because there was a liquor convention going on at the same time. That was the last night. I vowed not to drink cognac after that night because the next morning was the first day of the trade show. I was sitting down on the ground typing out the daily blog post, and Brian Hewitt from Stogie Review walked by, looked at me, and goes, "You look rough." And given what Brian Hewitt looked like at the time, I really decided that I might need to start taking inventory of my life at that point. And I felt like shit.
A lot of people got blasted at that party. I remember them jumping into the pool, fully clothed and things of that nature. So
I did not do that, but yeah.
You remember?
No, I didn't. I mean, I remember the night. I remember at 3 o'clock in the morning, like walking around New Orleans, trying to find my way back to the hotel.
Ugh.
Yeah, not great. But the party was a lot of fun. And
it was.
Other cool thing about the Mombacho parties, they obviously came out with the Diplomatico cigar, but for many years before that, they had a good relationship with Diplomatico, and so Half Wheel's favorite rum brand would usually be featured at the Mombacho parties. All right, any particular year that stands out as like a favorite year for you covering this trade show?
No, my memory is not what it used to be. But I think I prefer the time period between, let's call it 2016, 2018, give or take. The one that wasn't in New Orleans.
Brooks really enjoying the LVCC.
Yeah, New Orleans not a great place to smoke a cigar outside, but in the summer. But so there's that. Are we?
Yeah, we're just gonna move on.
Okay, that's what I've got.
All right.
What about you, Charlie? What was your favorite year?
They all kind of blend together at this point. All right. Favorite musical feature. So a lot of companies have there's a lot of people in the cigar business who have some sort of background in music, whether that's and a lot of drummers in particular. But you've got Michael Herklotz, Ernesto Perez-Carrillo Jr., Abe Flores, Pete Johnson. There's a very, very long list of people who enjoy music and have had some sort of other career in music in addition to their career in the cigar industry.
Huber?
I don't know about Huber. Did he? He looks like
band,
someone,
right?
He looks like someone that would be in a band. I have
was
no
in a
clue.
band.
All right, but anyway, there are a couple of companies. I mentioned Rocky Patel earlier. They bring in some singers who have really gone all out at the musical features at the trade show. So we're going to highlight two of them in particular. Brooks, do you want to start off with our first one?
Yeah. So what I remember distinctly is, Nickpadomo. I'm looking at the drum. I'm looking at the drum set.
I remember distinctly. Let me look at my notes.
Nickpadomo very often will start. He brings in his drum set. Very very nice drum set, and would play solos after the show was done. At the end of the day,
or all day during the setup day,
and during the setup day. And he was actually quite good at it. From what little I know of drum pounding, whatever, and
drum pounding.
It sounded great, and it meant the day was over typically. So in terms of covering the booths, so it's very loud and very obvious when he does it, and I enjoyed it when it happened.
Yeah, the other one that stands out to me is Arturo Sandoval, the multi-time Grammy Award winner trumpet player, who's very good friends with the Fuente family, and will play the trumpet. He also last year he played in Rocky's booth as well. But we'll play the trumpet, and it's always cool. He's very down to earth, and he'll just walk around. If you didn't know any better, Arturo Sandoval might as well just look like a retailer who's at the PCA Trade Show, and obviously quite good at the trumpet. All right, so in addition to music, a lot of booths have we even have snacks and coffee in our little office on the trade show floor. But there have been some that go above and beyond with that. Brooks, do you want to? Immediately, as soon as I typed out this question, knew what your immediate response would be.
Yeah, so I don't remember what year it was, 2016, 17, somewhere around there. But I heard people come up to me. Patrick, I believe, was one of the first, and said, "Hey, listen, you've got to try these beef sticks from Jim over at Island Pork Stick." Well,
it literally says pork sticks right there, Brooks.
Made of meat from Island Jim. And I was like, really? Okay. So I went over there, and he was giving these things out, and he had these made specifically, and even sold some of them for online after the show, as I recall. And they were very, very good. I was very impressed, and just a really cool something to hand out, and something that really went along with his whole theme. And it was a pretty good idea, and a pretty good product.
Yeah, they were. I don't know what the Slim Jim alternative market's like, but they were very well done.
Wish you'd do it again
for what they were. I also knew what would likely be your second answer to this question.
Indeed, and so coffee is a big deal when it comes to doing this kind of thing, at least for me. And so Placencia, every year I can remember, they have had a coffee bar where they basically make you a Cuban style coffee. Which is very, very good and very, very well done. And they'll make as many as you want. So, you stand there and you say, hey, listen, can I get one? And they go, great. And they give it to you and you go, great. Can I have another one? They're like, great. And they give you another one. And, you can just drink and do whatever you want. And whatever you stop by, they'll give it for you. It's very nice, well done, and very, very good coffee.
Yeah. Also, Placencia, I would imagine serving some Tank Brewing beer, because they also own the brewery, or part owners.
I've never had beer on the floor. So in terms of from Placencia,
yeah. So two that stand out to me. The first one I can't pronounce. This is Yonga Jenga something. This is from Nirka Reyes and her husband Bismarck. Bismarck is a trained chef and also a baker. And so they launched this pandemic business in the Dominican Republic, making pastries, and it has taken off. And last year, they brought some to the trade show floor. And these are excellent. They're probably about as healthy as that Placencia coffee is. They're not very healthy, but they taste awesome. I hope at one point they come to the U.S. in some form or fashion. But if you're in the Dominican Republic, you can order from them, and you can go to their Instagram page, and they got all sorts of details. But from what I understand, I've only had the sweeter pastries from them, but Bismarck makes bread and all sorts of things, which I imagine is excellent. And their Instagram is great food porn. And the other one that stands out was from my first trade show all the way back in 2010. We were in New Orleans for the show, and J.C. Newman had a hurricane machine with a attendant there pouring hurricanes. One of them may have been dropped on my foot by Bobby Newman. And I appreciate Kara at J.C. Newman for sending this picture because I didn't snap a picture of the hurricane machine. I think they tried to get it back in 2015, but didn't. But it's always nice, like, you know, the hurricane machine, I'm guessing, was way more expensive than you would ever imagine it. Certainly it would be in Las Vegas. But it's cool. J.C. Newman used to also host parties. They would host a Diamond Crown party, and they would always be, they would lean in, particularly New Orleans, heavy to like the New Orleans themes. And so, you know, not every year I would say J.C. Newman goes all out at the trade show, but some years they really have done some cool things, which is why they've been mentioned multiple times today. So, in addition to food and drinks on the trade show floor, we've got some foodies at Half Wheel, and we work hard. And so I feel like it's a good idea for us to go out and enjoy some interesting meals. And we have had some particularly in Las Vegas. And Brooks, anyone in particular stand out to you?
Yes, and I have to thank you, Charlie, because, you know, I would go to Vegas in my other career a long time ago, and I would, you know, eat at, you know, McDonald's or wherever. And Charlie really made a point of saying we need to go out and actually have some good food. I'm not a foodie. I am certainly not as versed in such things. However, Charlie came up with a great idea to have a place to go to a place called A, which is not spelled E-H, apparently. And this is by
Jose Andres.
Jose Andres, thank you. Inside the Cosmo.
Inside the Cosmopolitan,
right.
Inside his other restaurant.
And so it's like
Paleo.
It's like a secret restaurant, and you sign up months in advance and had to get a golden ticket, and it was all very, you know, annoying in that regard. However, when you walk in, what?
Whimsical? Yeah,
I would say annoying.
Yeah, just alternatively.
When you walk in, it's basically you have 8 people and they're sitting around a bar, which has chefs at it, and they basically just make you food right there. And I had never been to anything like it, and it was very cool because it's like 25 courses, very small, obviously, and they would come out in very, very different ways. For example, the one on your screen here, you have what looks to be a Dorito style.
It looks to be a couch
chip, which was full of peanut butter and jelly, as I recall.
Spicy peanut butter and jelly.
And spicy peanut butter and jelly. And it was on a couch, a leatherette couch. Maybe leather, I don't know. That was like a Barbie couch, and that was all there was. That was your you know, your course for that time. And they would just continuously put these things in front of you, and you'd take a bite or eat the 2 bites or 3 bites, and then they would take it away. And it took about 3 hours, as I recall. And it was really, really awesome. It was an amazing experience, and I wish we could go back and do it again. But every time I say we should do it again, I'm turned down. So.
I'm fearful that it's not going to be as exciting. That's one of the reasons why one of my favorite courses is one of the early ones, not in terms of how it tasted, but just like the surprise of it. But like, I don't want to mention it because I don't want to ruin potential surprises. But if they were like, hey, we completely changed the menu and presentation, then maybe.
It's been like 6 years. Certainly they've changed something.
I don't know. I mean,
we should do it again.
Okay. My favorite restaurant, or one of my favorite restaurants in Las Vegas, is called Kame. If you're into sushi, check it out. We're running a little bit long, so I'm not going to go into the full lengths of it, but it is, excuse me, if you've had sushi in the U.S., this will be a different experience, most likely. It is very, very different. Make sure you come with an appetite. Patrick had a special shout out to Picasso, which is a restaurant. Where is Picasso?
It's on the Strip.
It is.
It's right behind
it's the Bellagio.
It's right behind the.
It's at the Bellagio because it's right in front of their fountains. And the restaurant has like more than 20 Picassos hanging on the wall. The food was very good. It's very, very dark. One of my favorite parts about Picasso, it's very quiet, which is a rarity in Las Vegas, even for restaurants. All right, so now that we've gotten that out of the way, we're going to briefly, because it's been an hour, talk about some companies that we are looking forward to covering for the first time. So these aren't necessarily new companies, though maybe one of them is. And we just pulled, there seem to be about 35 of them that we have never covered at a trade show. And so, Brooks, why don't you get us started with 3 that you're looking forward to writing about this year?
Right. So first one, Big Sky Cigar Company. Now, this is a company based in Billings, Montana, which is not what you would normally think. And the former releases that they've released before have all been named after rivers in the state of Montana. They are releasing something new, 2 new releases at the show, Cryptid and El Profesor. I am impressed with the idea behind what they're doing with these new releases, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they can come out with for them. Secondly, Founders, which is a company that was based on the idea of their cigars are named after the founders of America and people who they think are really embody the idea of how America was founded and the ideals America was founded on. So Hamilton is one of their cigars, things of that nature. I like the idea. I like the I haven't smoked anything, but I love the idea behind what they're doing, and I think I'll continue to follow them in that regard. Finally, Stolen Throne Cigars, which is releasing a new cigar, Phantom Queen, a 5x54 Petite Bellicoso. It's a first LE limited edition release, and the company founded by Lee Marsh and J.R. Cannon. I love the art that they have on their bands. I have not tried any of the cigars as of yet, but the art is very cool, and they seem like nice guys, and I figure they should do well.
All right, so Brooks is going to pull the questions.
Yep.
And
while you're talking there,
I will talk about my 3 companies that stand out to me. So this is Bosquet, I'm guessing. I don't speak French.
Bosquet?
Probably not that.
Bosquet.
Yeah, why don't you just look at the questions? So this is Bosquet Paris, which is a high-end humidor manufacturer, from what I can tell. Like $20,000 humidors, and they've got some humidors that are even more expensive than that. So I'm curious. We all kind of like. I always tell people that like at the trade show, I'm sort of more interested in accessories because you can see them and play around with them. Whereas with cigars, like I don't really care what the cigar looks like. I'd rather just smoke it and figure it out, and that's tough to do at the trade show. Always nice to see, as Brooks mentioned, the ST Dupont booth or Ellie Blue, Daniel Marshall when he's there, Prometheus when he's been there. To have another sort of super high-end humidor company coming into the fray, we'll be curious to see what they bring to the trade show. Number 2 on my end is West Tampa Tobacco Company. This is a new company. This is from Rick Rodriguez, who was at General Cigar Company for a long time. He was the face of CAO, also at La Gloria Cabana before that, and he's no longer with General and has started his own company, which will debut at the trade show, I think. I don't think it's debuting before, but maybe it is. And I'm curious to see what Rick's got, and it's always interesting to see these next acts when you see people leave a cigar company and then go out on their own. Rick is the latest in a long line of people that have done that. Including Jeremy McDonald from Wildfire Cigar Company. So Wildfire launched last year right around the trade show. He did not have a booth, though. I think Jeremy was in Vegas. This year he's got a booth. I don't know if he's going to have any new products at the show. He certainly is working on some stuff. And, Jeremy was the longtime national sales manager for Caldwell. He's still a partner, to my knowledge, in Caldwell. And decided, last year, hey, if I'm going to have my own cigar company, now's the time to do it. And, here we are a year later. I've always enjoyed my time with Jeremy. He's one of the sort of more chill people to talk to, not just based off his appearance, but doesn't take things all that seriously most of the time, and likes good food, good stories as well. Just a guy that, is great to sort of hang out with when you need to sort of slow down from the hustle and bustle that is the trade show. All right, Brooks, let's get those questions on the screen.
You got it. Here we go. Mitchell San. Do you think the economy and current sales numbers decreasing that a lot of these new companies and even struggling small, mid-sized companies will disappear in the next few years since this boom was so short?
Yes.
Yes.
Look, I mean, the turnover with small companies exists regardless of how the economy is doing. I think a lot of people, look, if Brooks and I had started a cigar company, let's say 8 years ago, we would at that point have already been writing about cigars. I mean, Brooks started in 2009. I started in 2010. And 8 years ago would have been 2014. Would have been 5 years into this, or 4 years into this. We didn't have enough knowledge to start a cigar company at that point. I'm not even sure we did now. But we would have gotten taken for a ride because of not understanding, For example, how much should you pay for cellophane? How much should you pay for boxes? How much should you pay for shipping? Just those sorts of questions before you even get to the aspect of like, what tobacco should we use? What sizes should we make? What should we price the actual cigars at? Like, should we have a sales force? Should we hire brokers? Which brokers should we hire? You know, and then like the actual process of selling a cigar to a store and getting a consumer to buy it. Just the first parts of like where you can get screwed. There's no book to my knowledge about like, this is what you should do. And so if you go down to Latin America and come down with a wad of cash and are like, oh yeah, I'll pay 5 cents for cellophane. Factories will definitely take 5 cents per cellophane if you're willing to pay that. And a lot of these companies just end up in a position where they can't make money selling the cigars, that they lose money every time they sell a cigar, and they just start off on the wrong foot, and it's very, very difficult to change that. So, you know, I certainly think that what appears to be current trend of the economy will probably not help that situation. But even if it was as great as it could be, even if it was 2 years ago for the cigar industry, small companies are still going to struggle to stay alive in some capacities. Obviously, some of them do very well.
All right. This is a two-section question here.
Okay.
Tyler says, with the current economy and many brands reducing their footprints at shows, what innovations in marketing do you think could help? We currently see brands posting press releases prior to drum up interest prior to the show. Do you see more Drew Estate-like events or possible mid-tier size brands setting up dealer forums, bring out dealers for a specific brand event and releasing new products and such?
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily see that happening. I think that's a good idea, though. Can you put up the first part of the question again?
I can.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't. I mean, we're supposed to do a whole show about this, about what you should do differently.
As a nice lead-in.
But yeah, I definitely think that I mentioned it the last show, I believe. Like, may not be the best idea in the world to be introducing your one new cigar of the year at the same time as all of your competitors are also introducing a ton of new product. But I think for a lot of this sort of mid-tier brands, it's probably just more of an all or nothing proposition with the trade show, which is like, hey, how many of our accounts are going to the trade show? How many of the retailers that are at the trade show do we already have as accounts? Because here's the deal. If 90% of the retailers that are going to the trade show are already stores that you are selling to on any sort of a regular basis, you probably don't need to be at the trade show to do sales. You may want to go to the trade show because it's an easy way to say hi to a couple hundred retailers in one place. There are more than a couple hundred, but what you reasonably could do. And that's why, from what I understand, why companies like Patron are at the trade show. It's not necessarily to sell products or give big discounts or introduce new products. It's because it allows them to say hi and get FaceTime with hundreds of their stores, which means they don't necessarily need to go out and do individual events or trips to those stores. I think if you look at it like that, look at it as a marketing expense, it's a lot easier to have a successful trade show. If the goal is to try, though, to really increase the bottom line, the trade show seems like it's an uphill battle, just because it'd be one thing if the trade show had 400 new accounts that were at the trade show that these retailers or these manufacturers didn't already have. But in a world when, if you're Perdomo or Miami Cigar Company, very few of the retailers, like probably less than 20, that are walking around are stores that you are unaware of existing. And most likely it's because they're brand new stores. There's a reason why these companies have national sales forces. It's because they're supposed to go out and sell those cigars, 52 weeks a year. And so the trade show sort of serves as a weird speed bump in a lot of ways to that. And we'll definitely talk about that next week. All right. So if your question was on the screen and your mouse works, Brooks, what should they do?
They should send an email to contest@halfwheel.com. And
that comment off.
I'm working on it. Let me find out where it is. There.
Nope. Just click it again. All right.
There you go. And you have all of the things you have to make sure you have you are correct and on the bottom there. But just send it the email to contest@halfwheel.com, and we will forward it on to Drew Estate, and they will send you your prize.
All right, we have 2 more shows, as I mentioned at the top. We'll be back here next Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central, to talk a lot more about sort of along those lines of Tyler's questions about what we would do differently, both if we were running the trade show and also if we were running a cigar company at a trade show. And hopefully we have some solutions and not just criticisms.
Hopefully.
I realized that I didn't try to see if any of Patrick's things in particular got missed. He had a couple of, he mainly agreed with us, which was interesting because he didn't see the slideshow. And then we'll be back here on Wednesday of the following week to talk about the 10 products that we are most looking forward to. All right, Brooks, do you want to run the Drew Estate ad so we can have lunch?
Yes.
All right, thanks guys for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Half Wheel's coverage of the 2022 PCA Convention and Trade Show is brought to you by Drew Estate's Nica Rustica Adobe.